Hello, you. Yes, you, the one listening. Welcome to For the Better podcast, where you can listen to personal stories, experiences, and lessons learned about work, relationships, and life in general, where we can delve and deep dive into issues, answer most asked questions, and tell stories about how we can thrive despite uncertainties. A platform for you to learn a thing or two and become a better version of yourself. I am Jhes, always in progress. Come and listen to For the Better podcast.
Hey there, I'm Jhes, your host, welcoming you to For the Better podcast. Today, we're deep diving into a topic that I'm sure we've all struggled with at some point. You know, that annoying habit of letting our minds race with endless thoughts and worries. Yes, the never-ending loop on repeat in your head. And perhaps you are now thinking of what the topic is, and probably you got it right. So our topic for today's episode is overthinking. And there is a study from the Journal of Cognitive Psychotherapy about overthinking. And according to this journal, overthinking is a national epidemic among young and middle-aged adults, but is relatively rare among older adults. So 73% of 25 to 35-year-old overthink compared to 52% of 45 to 55 years old, and just 20% amongst 65 to 75 years old. I know everyone probably has been in that situation, and you might be in it right now. This topic has been on my list for a long time, and the reason why I haven't taken this topic to the podcast, it's because it's such a complicated topic, as there is a psychologial or scientific aspect to it. I'm not an expert on this, but since it's very common to all of us, and I had a good conversation with a friend recently, and I thought of sharing with you today, as it may help a little bit, because I have also been looking ways to counter or lessen my overthinking tendencies. And even for this topic, it's I was so excited that even I got to the point that I was already overthinking of what could the podcast be. So we're gonna get real about the struggles of overthinking and why it happens and how to chill out a little. So grab your favorite drink, stick around, and keep listening. So I tried researching about this topic just so you can get some learning after listening to this podcast. And one of the few things that I looked up in the internet are some common questions about overthinking. And here are what I found. Some of the questions, or I have 3 questions here. So why is it easy to get caught up in our thoughts? So I'm not the only one. I guess I also ask the same questions, and perhaps you're asking the same as well. And the second question is it even possible to stop overthinking? Don't we all want to know how to stop and even prevent overthinking from happening? But if we cannot, what can we do to break out of this cycle if we are in it? So from what I've found is that overthinking is kind of like a habit. So our brains are wired to look for problems, to anticipate danger, and it's a survival mechanism. But sometimes that mechanism goes into overdrive and we start worrying about things that might never happen. Our brains are always playing a worst case scenario game. So from my research, and this is from Harvard Business Review article, I will link some of the research notes for you later on. So there are 3 main types of overthinking. So first is rumination. Second is overanalyzing. And third is future tripping. So what is rumination? So according to that article, rumination is a mental loop where you dwell on past events, especially the negative ones. Can you relate to that? You might ruminate if you are fixated on negative feedback, bring up past failures, and if you're very cautious about work and worry about your peers' perception about you. So I have a story about this, and this is personal story and personal experience. So I am guilty about ruminating on things. And there is this one experience I had with one very simple presentations I did at work. And it was on my head for days. And I thought it went well, but my mind started racing as soon as I sat down. The questions came up like, did I say the right thing? Did I sound stupid? Did I convey the message properly? Did the audience think I was unprepared? So, at that moment, I couldn't even shake the feeling that I'd made a fool of myself. I don't know. That's what's in my head at that point in time. It was a very simple presentation, and I was thinking about it for days. And I don't even know why. There was also a time when I blamed myself for a failed relationship. Sometimes even issues at work. So you may have, other experiences related to this type of overthinking. If you have, tell me your story. What are you ruminating about? So another type of overthinking is overanalyzing, and it says from the article, you might overanalyze if you first procrastinate, over-rely on others' approval or validation, and have difficulty prioritizing. So again, it seems like I am really an overthinker because this overanalyzing is also like, yes, I can relate to that. So as simple as, sometimes you spend excessive time crafting that email to a colleague or a text message to someone. You may be able to relate to this as well. So how about when you were deciding what places to visit and could not come up with an answer because of what ifs? How about when you received a comment or a feedback for someone, from a friend or from a colleague, and you were trying to analyze any hidden meanings to it? So if you have probably had those experiences in the past, maybe you were overthinking and overanalyzing. So the third type of overthinking is future tripping. So you are future tripping if you spend too much energy planning for every possible scenario and have trouble celebrating successes because you're always thinking about what's next. So this is a story from a friend, and he could not decide to let others know what he feels about certain things because he worries about the future and what could happen. What will others think about him after a revelation? He's looking at the worst case scenario all the time, and so he has never taken any step further towards telling other people how he feels. It would be okay if it weren't for the fact that he said he always feels like pretending to be someone else he's not whenever he's around other people. So my question to him at that time is that, what if their reaction was positive and it's not what he was thinking, like the worst case scenario? What if they don't care at all? And what if they still choose to support him? I know you also have similar situations or experiences, and perhaps just like me, wanted to know how to lessen this habit. So now that we know the different types of overthinking, the question is, how can we break the cycle, or how can we lessen or reduce overthinking, if that's even possible? So I've tried to look up in the internet, and do you know what? What I found are very simple ways of how you can break the cycle and to at least reduce a little bit of the overthinking. Because I think probably it says that it's a habit, right? So it takes a bit of time for us to break the cycle or to really stop the overthinking. But at least if we know some steps or some strategies, I would say, to lessen or break the cycle of overthinking, that will be really helpful on a day-to-day basis. So first thing I found is that self-awareness. So paying attention to yourself. So when you catch yourself overthinking, I know I personally catch myself overthinking for so many times. Take a pause. Acknowledge that you are overthinking. And when you are taking that pause, ask yourself, you ask yourself in this situation, or let me rephrase that. So asking a question during the situation, they call it a cognitive restructuring. See, that's the reason why it's so complicated, because there is some scientific element to it. So cognitive restructuring. So by stopping your thoughts and asking yourself a question, you interrupt your emotions going through that process and can focus your mind. So personal story is that I usually ask myself, whenever I catch myself overthinking, is that what is the real issue here? So I always ask myself that. And thinking is only helpful when it leads to a positive action. So take note that there is a difference between overthinking and problem solving. So the latter, which is problem solving, comes with an action. So overthinking is just thinking. And again, so the next step that you would do once you catch yourself is take action instead of constant thinking. So depending on what you are overthinking. So for me, for example, I first look at what I can control. And if what I'm worried about is within that space, I ask myself again, so what is the simplest thing that I can do to move forward with this? So for me, it's important to focus on the things that I can control because, outside of the space, I cannot do anything about it unless I explore the so-called things that I can influence. So remember, so if you're listening to this podcast, so imagine a circle, and that inner circle is the things that you can control. And then imagine another circle, an outer circle. These are the things that you can influence. You cannot control those aspects or things, but there's a way for you to influence them. And then a bigger circle, the outside circle, is the things that's really outside of your control. So for me, whenever I'm overthinking, I would always look at what I can control in that moment. And if that situation is actually within the things I can control. If not, I would look at whether is it something that I can influence. If nothing, then I'll stop thinking about it, because there's no point in constantly thinking about that topic or about that situation if you cannot control anything and if you cannot influence anything about that topic. It's just like constantly thinking and you can't lead to any action to it. And the other thing that I usually do is look at situations objectively. So I've learned this from one of the sessions I had with my coach. No, it's not my coach. When I had a therapy from the therapist, not from my coach, from the therapist. So she said about whether the situation that I'm thinking or the impression, is it a fact? And is it the truth? So after acknowledging that you are overthinking, and after looking at the things about that situation, whether you can and cannot control, ask yourself if what you are thinking is true and factual at that very moment. So usually when I'm in the situation, I would ask whether is it a fact? Is it a truth? So what proof do I have to say it is a true and a fact? So simply put, is it real? So know that what you think can or could happen is actually not real because it hasn't happened yet. So in my friend's case, for example, so he has not decided anything yet. He has not done anything yet, but because he's afraid of what other people may say, he said that he can't move forward because he's thinking that there will be a change in terms of how people respect him and how they will see him differently in the future. But the question is what he is thinking a fact? Is it real? I mean, in my opinion, it isn't. It could happen. But since he hasn't taken any step yet, that remains just a what if and not a fact. And it isn't even true. So it's just something that he thinks could happen. But it's not true that they will disrespect him. It is not true that they will see him differently. Right? So I'm not sure. Tell me. Let me know. Once you've reached this point, when you're listening to me, and if you have other opinion or if you have a different perspective, please let me know. You can, I don't know whether you can comment on the comment box, or you can send me or write me an email or a message, or however you want to convey your perspective on this. But yes, so it's not actually true and it's not a fact. So after analyzing that situation objectively, you could break the thought pattern by doing something else. Because it's a loop and it's a habit and you keep doing it over and over again. If you find yourself still going back to the same topic in your head and not stopping, why not go for a run? Sing your heart out. Say a little prayer. That could also be good. Just do something else apart from thinking of that situation. As I said, since it's a loop, to get away from it, you must change something. So you can take a break from the loop, hence doing something else will help. I know that we've all been there. We've lost in a whirlwind of thoughts, worrying about the past or stressing about, the future. So overthinking can feel like a heavy weight holding us back from living fully in the present moment. But you're not alone. By recognizing, the patterns of overthinking and practicing mindfulness or being self-aware and taking an action, just a very simple action that you could do, you can break free from this cycle and experience greater peace and clarity in your life. So let's work together. Let's share each other's experiences and how have you break the cycle of overthinking. I've been implementing those actions or those strategies I mentioned earlier. And I am making the conscious choices every time I catch myself overthinking. So as I said, it's not something that's very easy to stop. But as you constantly do to breaking the cycle more and more, that you will be able to reduce or lessen overthinking, because you know already that the triggers. How do you start this? You catch yourself. So whenever you catch yourself, you just do the things that I've mentioned earlier on, those strategies. It really helps. And we can cultivate a more positive and a balanced mindset. Remember, you have the power to shape your thoughts and create a life you love. So, my listeners, if you are still here at this very moment, you take a deep breath, let go of what you cannot control, and focus on what truly matters. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode. I hope that episode has provided valuable insights and tools for navigating the challenges of overthinking. Be sure to subscribe to For the Better podcast for future episodes on personal growth and well-being topics. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.
That is it for today. Before you go, show some love by liking this episode and following this podcast and my social media accounts. You can also send in your topic and questions if you have any. Thank you so much for listening For the Better podcast. Stay tuned for the next episodes. This has been Jhes, always reminding you, just be you, and bye for now.